Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you the podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Kacey Kingry. Welcome, Kacey.
Thank you for having me, Kathy. I'm so happy to be here.
So I think this is going to be a really fun interview. I know we just met a couple weeks ago through a mutual friend, but that's when I really enjoy these conversations. As we met, we had a great conversation, but now we get to dive deep into your story about how did I get here? And where is here, by the way, is Kacey is a life coach and yoga teacher. So I got to tell you, the vast variety of different careers of people that I've interviewed. It's so fun. My network and background tends to be more corporate. So I love just all of these other careers that are out there that are so important and meaningful in life. So Kacey, I always like to start with the icebreaker questions. Tell us where you grew up, kind of how many kids were in your family, where you are in the birth order, and how you think all that shaped you as an adult.
Oh boy. Well, I was born and raised right here in Denver, Colorado. I'm actually a sixth generation Colorado native, which is sort of unheard of in Colorado these days. So a lot of family history, a lot of rich history tying to the Colorado area, which is very special to me and my family. I'm the oldest of three kids. My brothers are twins. They just turned 40 last week, and they're 4 years younger than me. So I'm the oldest of three. And so I think definitely them being twins had a very interesting dynamic on our family. And me being the oldest, I definitely felt like my story was probably the maybe quote unquote messiest, but definitely I feel like I was the one that paved the way for everyone else, for sure, for my brothers anyways.
I got to tell you, that oldest role has got to be so tough because you've got no one to kind of pave the way for you, and you're just figuring it out on your own. Whereas I'm a second and a middle, and I always got to see that, and how she bumped into things. I'm like, oh, not going to do that. And so I'll just kind of follow what works in the wake of that. But the twin dynamics has to be very unique. I interviewed someone else, and she too was the oldest, and then twins came, and she was like, yeah, there was me, and then came the twins, and of course, you got all of the parents' attention for 4 years, and then now the twins, and boy, that's a big deal, twins, right? Because everybody makes such a big deal about the twins, and I would guess.
Exactly. And then they were boys too. So it was like just the opposite of me in so many different ways. But we have a very, very close relationship, and they're wonderful men, and they've been two of my very best friends growing up. So I really count myself lucky and blessed. But I took some bumps. I was the one that was grounded all the time. I was the one that was always in trouble because I was the one that was pushing all those boundaries and stepping out in that way. So they definitely got to learn from my mistakes, for sure.
Okay. Well, and I had another firstborn tell me that she recognized that she kind of lives her life that there's nothing in her way. She's like, I just have this feeling that nothing's ever in my way. She said, but when I think of my brother, I was always in his way because he came after me. And I'm like, oh, I never thought of that my sister was in my way. But that's an interesting thing that I can't even imagine as firstborn, just that I guess everything's out there for you and you just go figure it out, and you don't really observe and watch others. You just go do.
Exactly. And sometimes it's pretty, but oftentimes it really wasn't.
As you said, it was kind of messy. So what kind of activities did you all do as kids? Being 4 years older, I'm guessing you kind of had your own thing first, and being the girl.
We were a pretty athletic family. We all came together around sports. So I was a soccer player, and then my brothers were both 3-sport athletes. So my dad coached most of their teams. So I think, we were all always kind of sharing, going to each other's games, each other's practices, each other's events, and either participating in our own stuff or cheering the other ones along. And, it was really kind of special. My stuff was really special, but then witnessing my brothers' sporting events and how they would work together because they were always on the same teams, and one would block for the other one and stuff. So it was always kind of really special to watch them interface and interact on their teams. And then my dad was always a part of that too. So I always kind of saw that as a fun way for my mom and I to support them. And then they always did the same for me. It just looked a little different because there was only one of me and two of them.
Yeah, the numbers.
Yeah, they doubled it up.
Okay, so introvert or extrovert or ambivert?
Oh goodness.
Or that term.
Does that mean both?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely say growing up, I was full blown extrovert, but the older I get, the more balanced it becomes. That I definitely, I still love being outward, and so much of my life with my yoga students and with my clients is that outward type of interaction. But I find that I need a lot more quiet time to balance it for myself on the other end, which is something that I either didn't require or didn't give myself permission for in my younger years.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we know about it when we're young. I don't, unless you're really, maybe really heavy introverted as a young person. I guess I was, but I never really just sat in my room and read. I'm trying to think. I was more of an observer, I guess, and I was just out and active, but not always talking and expressing myself verbally. It was more just, out running or, playing volleyball, doing something active. So yeah, interesting. Yeah, as we age, we I guess that's the beauty of it, right? Is we learn ourselves better and know what we need. Trying to figure that out as a kid. So okay, so on the fun meter, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 being life of the party, where do you put yourself?
Oh goodness, that's a hard one. I think I would be like a 3.5 or a 4.
Ah,
I think that I think that I have a fair amount of fun, but I think that I tend to take life pretty seriously too. And I spend a lot of time with people in the seriousness of life. So I think that that could be something going forward, that maybe I could be just a little bit more fun or have more fun. But I think I do okay.
yeah. Would you say your brothers on where are they? Since they're twins,
Oh,
and yeah, did that kind of shape you in terms of, were they the life of the party? So therefore you kind of went, oh, I'm fine being, on the side, or
well, I never really felt like I was on the side. I just felt like we had our own things. I would say that they're probably, are they more fun than me? I don't know. I think maybe we're all pretty balanced. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
well, and that
I
is
would like to have more fun in my life. Let's go with that.
okay. We'll go with that. Okay, so on the risk meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low risk taker, 5 being high risk taker, where do you put yourself?
Whew, okay. I think traditionally I would be more adverse to risk, so I'd be a low risk taker, but I am literally getting ready to go out and just completely fly the coop, so to speak. So I think my risk now would be more of like a 4 or 4.5. I think I'm really leaning in to the opportunities that life is giving me right now and taking a lot of risks. So I wouldn't say that that describes my personality always, but right now I'm definitely leaning into the unknown and leaning into the uncertainty. And I might throw up also.
Well, that is so good to hear. I tell you, I love these questions because it really, as we hear your story, we're going to hear about that, right? We're going to hear about where maybe you were, not taking risks and how that played out in your life, and now how and why you've decided to do that. So very cool. So, okay, so tell us what it's like to be a life coach and a yoga teacher, and then we'll get into, how did I get here?
Wonderful. Being a life coach and a yoga teacher is truly just such an honor and a gift and a blessing. And I feel like it's the culmination of everything that has happened to me or has occurred into my life up till this point. Like it's been all of that water under the bridge that has equipped me to be able to sit in this seat of just walking with people through their lives in these various capacities. And so I get to be in the trenches with people in their lives, whether it's in the yoga studio with the movement and the spiritual practice of yoga, or whether it's in these one-on-one client coaching sessions where we get to get into the nooks and crannies of their lives and see how it is that they're showing up and see what they would like instead, and build a bridge between where they are now and where they want to go. And so it's like the most amazing thing in the world that I literally just get to walk with people along their journey and kind of shine my light onto their path. And that's kind of how I see it. It is like, I have this light that I'm just kind of casting out, and let's see if we shine it on your life, what it might illuminate that you haven't been able to see with your own light up until this point. So for me, it's just an honor and a challenge and a gift to be able to walk with people in this way.
Wow, I love how you describe that about shining a light on. In a way, that's kind of what I'm doing with some of these stories, right? Is shining a light on, how did I get here? And, what are all those pieces? And when we look backward, it all makes sense. But when we're, going through it, probably none of it made sense. And and it's all about your degree of comfort of being in that place of, does this really make sense for me or not? Yeah, very interesting, very cool. Well, I can just see how you light up yourself when you talk about what you do. So this is so cool. So let's go back into that junior high school time frame. And what did you want to be when you grew up? Were you thinking, oh, I want to be a life coach, I want to teach yoga? Was that on the radar?
Not consciously, not explicitly, not even in the slightest. I think I had little like twinklings that maybe if I had known, like you said, hindsight, it all makes perfect sense. Like I think the seeds were planted in my earlier years. But when I was in junior high and high school and college, I was all about broadcast journalism. And I wanted to be the first female hockey commentator in the NHL. So I even took like one semester of French in like my undergrad in an attempt to prepare for that. But that's not how the story went. But my early career was really dedicated to media, journalism, specifically sports information. And in college, I started teaching group exercise, sort of just aerobics. And that really was the seed, I think, that led towards the yoga. So in my earlier years, it was more about fitness and sports and journalism.
Wow. So very cool. So as a young person, you talked about that you were kind of a sports family. You were all athletes and all kind of very active. And then when you get into, looking at a career in life, you're like, oh, I want to do something with sports. But you were more on the journalism side. But then you kind of, sounds like you found then, oh, this group teaching thing could be really powerful.
Yeah. And now that you put it that way, I think I've always had a gift for communication and a gift with using my words, whether that's in written form or spoken form. So I think merging the sports and the journalism together was a really actionable way for me to feel like, oh, this is my career path. And I love sports and I love moving my body. And I'm also good with words. So this makes a lot of sense for me in this moment.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and that's what a lot of people that I've interviewed talk about. Well, I was good in math, so I went down this path, but then I realized I was actually better at communicating. So I switched, or, I was good at, English and all that. And then I switched over to this because I really saw the business side of things. So yeah, it's very interesting. College is such a amazing time to learn about ourselves, right? So okay. So what was that first, you mentioned you were teaching aerobics. Well, but that was probably to kind of get through college. But, what did you do? Kind of, okay, I get that degree. Now what, right? What's that first job?
Yeah. So so basically I started teaching group exercise when I was 18 and I'm 44 now, or 43 now. So getting ahead of myself. So I've been teaching for like 25-ish years now. So that's been kind of a common thread. But so I was studying journalism and I worked for the sports information department when I was in my undergrad at the University of Colorado Boulder. So I traveled all over the Big 12 with all of the sports teams there. I worked predominantly with men's basketball, women's volleyball, and football. So then when I graduated from CU, I was offered a job to be the sports information director at the Colorado School of Mines, which was a Division III school at the time in the RMAC. And I was hired to be the media liaison for all 18 of their varsity sports. So that was my first job out of college. And I really just dove in headfirst, got my feet totally wet and spearheaded that program for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. Well, what a great first job. I mean, here you have a degree. You've been doing it for for some teams at another university, but to then be the director at a, I mean, that's got to be really cool to look at it from a, oh, here's my real big start. How fun.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you feel like, oh, I did it. I got that great job.
Yeah, it was really pretty fun, and it was like a tons of responsibility, and I had to host swim meets and keep the statistics for swim meets, and I'd never even attended one before, so there was a lot of stuff that was out of my wheelhouse. But I also did, like, in the press box, I would do like the PA commentary, and one night for a soccer game, the CD that I was using to play the national anthem broke, so I sang the national anthem.
What?
And then the team won, and they weren't supposed to win, so then the soccer coach had me sing it every time then until they lost. So it was just a really special, unique, really fun first job. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Sounds like. But I got to ask, how were you ready? Did they teach you about how to kind of rally teams and people around? So I'm guessing you maybe had volunteers that would help with these activities and events. Like, if you've never run a swim meet before, you don't know what you're doing. How you're relying on people to do that, right? So do you feel like you had good preparation from a leadership and management perspective with your degree, or was that something you kind of went, oh crap, now there's this part I got to learn?
Yes and yes. I mean, I just could ask for help, and I knew that I could do that, and I did do that. But I didn't feel particularly equipped to solve that, but I knew that I had people on the bus that could help me with that, which I was able to recruit them to do so. But it was very much just trial by fire, and learning from my mistakes and learning as I went, for sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got to remember, when I think back to some of my first careers, I had this natural leadership ability that I didn't even really recognize. So I got put in these areas of responsibility, but I unfortunately had the mindset that I should know it. And so I don't think I asked enough or valued what other people brought as much. I just tried to dive in and learn it and figure it out. And if I look back, that's something I would do different. I like how you said, I just asked for help, and it came. And yeah,
there's no way I could have pulled it off otherwise. Truly.
Yeah.
Yep. But there was something stirring in me during that time spiritually also. And so I actually left that job and moved to Chicago for just a handful of years. And that's the only time I haven't lived in Colorado. And I attended theological seminary school. So I went to Christian seminary in Chicago to sort of answer this call that was kind of tugging at my heart. So I left that job in athletics to sort of uncover this spiritual quest. That was my next move after working at Colorado School of Mines.
Wow, that's a pretty big move. And so was it like a master's degree then? Did you now?
Yes, I have a master's of arts in Christian ministry with an emphasis on faith and health. So I sort of devoted myself to this pursuit of understanding the mind-body connection, all the while teaching group exercise while I was studying in seminary in Chicago.
Yeah, because you have to earn some sort of way to live, right? So it sounds like you fall back on, this is something I can do. It's got flexible hours. I could see how that would totally fit. And if you're, really good at it, you've already been doing it probably for 10 years at this point.
Right. But at the time, even I still just saw it as something that I did on the side. But then it was when I went to North Park and went to seminary and started understanding how faith and how spirituality was connected to the body, it started to become more and more clear to me that maybe this thing that I was doing on the side, it wasn't so much this hobby, but it was actually the vehicle with which to live out this spirituality that I was getting so curious about.
Yeah. Wow.
So when I went to seminary, it didn't really feel in line with what they were teaching at seminary, but I feel that it was like the step that I needed to start to integrate whatever was happening to me spiritually into what I was doing professionally.
Yeah. So how did you find that program? I'm guessing if you've got, like you were saying, this calling or this kind of desire, you probably researched a bunch of program. I don't even know if program's the right term for that, to go, well, where do I want to go? Or had this been part of your faith growing up?
I didn't actually research a lot. It was part of the denomination that my family belonged to growing up, and I had belonged to growing up. And so I got a full scholarship to this program. And so again, it just kind of seemed like the next right thing. And sometimes I kind of look at my choices in life and I feel that I just sort of take whatever is in front of me. And sometimes I've judged myself for that in the past. But I think it's actually just been the way that my life has worked, that it just presents itself and it's there and it feels right. So I do it.
Well, I would say don't judge yourself. Because it's easy for me to say that, number one. But secondly, after doing, 100 plus of these interviews, that's what so many people do. But the thing is maybe you were manifesting the right things more than you even knew. So it's easy to judge sometimes, well, this is here, I guess I should do this. I don't know. How do we know what's the right thing to do? I have a friend right now who she left a company intentionally because it was kind of toxic. Took another job, really good fit, very excited. And then like 4 months later, that company gets bought and then they lay off everybody. And so now she's unemployed going, well, now what? And so do I change industry? So in a way, the world is wide open for her, but that's also really scary. She's like, I don't know what I want to do. And now she's gotten close on 2 different offers and it's like not been that long. And so I think she's also looking at, well, do I commit to something that, I don't know. It's been really interesting to go through this journey with her at this time. Also, while I'm doing these interviews, maybe I need to just interview her right now and see how she's making it through transition.
That would be interesting to just do a series of interviews with her to follow that through.
Yeah, follow her thread, right? While she's going through this. So yeah.
There's this quote that I love that says, "Wanderer, you make the path by walking." And I feel like that's what you're speaking to, is like everyone wants this laid out path, or tell me which way to turn, or what's the quote unquote right thing, but really like you just make your path by walking it. Oh, and it's so scary.
It is. Well, but it so resonates. I'm part of a peer advisory board, and we were talking yesterday about we do a mastermind session, and they had these ideas for me on this particular challenge I was working on. And one of the things I said was, I probably just need to get started doing this and it will reveal itself. And that's exactly what you're saying, right? Is that when you're wandering, you take that first step and then you're like, oh, look, I can go right or left here. Now I have to choose. And the next thing you know, you're where you are, but that may or may not be where you thought you were going to be. So I love that quote. I love that. And it's also about being in action. I will say too, there's so much about indecision and that you could just be paralyzed by that, but being in action. So great quote. Okay. So you get your master's. And then, so was this a master's that you're thinking, do I want to go maybe into the seminary, or are you thinking you just needed to do it? It sounds like you just needed to go through it.
Yeah. And I just needed to know how I could use my spirituality to fuel me forward. And it was such an interesting experience because that act of being at seminary really broke me down and really like damaged my faith in many ways. And I wouldn't consider myself to be part of the Christian church anymore, not because of that experience, but because of just the way my path has evolved. But I had to go deeply in to excavate that for myself, and then to also show myself how important the fitness aspect of it was. That what I was being called to wasn't necessarily anything specifically about, getting the body to be a specific shape, but rather like how we embody being in our bodies and what that looks like from a spiritual perspective, and how our thoughts and how our beliefs affect what it's like to show up in our bodies. And that's what ultimately, not right away, but ultimately what led me to yoga.
Yeah. So I can see how when I asked you if being a life coach and yoga teacher was something you wanted to be when you were young, I can see, and you said, oh, the seeds were there, but I didn't really know. I can see now how you were really, uncovering those different seeds. And there's a very discerning difference between what you just said there, right? About training someone to look a certain way, or maybe to participate or perform in a sport in a certain way, versus the mind, spirit, body connection. And yeah, totally get it. Wow.
Exactly. So from seminary, I started working for an international fitness company called Les Mills. And I became a master trainer for them. So I traveled all around teaching instructors how to teach their programs. So that was very formative. And then I also worked for a local gym here in Denver as their group exercise coordinator. And so I spent a few years there just sort of leading my team of teachers and teaching and training people to teach the Les Mills programs. Again, just trying to figure out how I wanted to apply the spiritual matter that was inside me in physical form. And that was actually the moment when my life really hit rock bottom and really imploded in a way that it never has before. Because as I was doing all of this excavating and participating in sports and leading exercise and being in seminary and all of these things, I was also drinking alcohol fairly heavily the entire time. And that's something that's kind of part of the story of my life and the story of my family is that alcohol is just a big part of our family and what we do. And so growing up as a child, it was really the only tool that I inherited, or the biggest tool that I learned how to use. I wouldn't say the only. I had a wonderful childhood and a great upbringing, and my parents did a great job. Alcohol happens to be just sort of the lens through which I look at most of my upbringing in my past. And so when I came out of seminary and came back to Colorado and was living this way, I was trying to kind of find myself and how to apply everything that was inside of me. And I was also drinking a lot. And I ended up getting a DUI and wrecking my car and going to rehab. And it was at that moment in 2009 when my life just took a real big pivot.
Wow. Thank you for being so vulnerable to share that with us, because up to this point, I hadn't imagined that was part of it. And that it feels like that's kind of a surprise, but it's also, I mean, for you to share that is super important, because it shows that people can be one way on the outside. I'm sure a lot of your class members would look at you and say, she's got this all together and she's up there and physically fit, and not know that all this other was going on. And so, wow. So you must have felt very conflicted, that physically you were doing such great things for your body, but then physically you were doing bad things for your body, and then but also still all this emotional and spiritual stuff spinning in there. Wow. Okay, so this is big transition point for you, I'm guessing.
It was really big. And there was an integrity piece in there for me where I wasn't living in complete harmony, where I was saying one thing and doing another. And that's part of where the judgment piece comes in, where it's easy for me to judge myself for that. But there was also something really, really beautiful about the inconsistency of that. There was something so human about that, especially when I look back on myself, because it's like when we tend to look at addicts, or when we look at people who are struggling with substance abuse, we tend to label people as only one thing. And then we get this image of them that it's like you're either functioning or you're, homeless on the side of the road with nothing. And they're my example is that there's so many shades of gray in between that. And I actually look back on that with a lot of pride in some ways, because even though I was struggling inside and I was broken inside, and I was using the wine to get myself just to regular so I could live with all of that, I was still serving and I was still showing up, and it was imperfect and it was ugly. And there were times that I didn't show up. But categorically speaking, I was still really giving everything that I had, even though I was drinking. And so I'm actually kind of proud of that in some ways, that it feels really human to me that I got to be a lot of things all at once and not just one particular thing.
Yeah. That's so important that you bring this up in terms of that we're not one or the other. I was talking with a young person the other day, and she mentioned that a similar thing, that she said when she was in high school, they had someone come in and talk about alcohol and drug addiction. And basically then how she concluded it was, well, if you have these things, you're going to end up living under a bridge and homeless. So that's how she thought alcoholics looked. Then only to find out that her dad was actually an alcoholic. Again, she was young at the time, but she didn't realize what was going on. And she's like, no, my dad can't, he's not an alcoholic, because alcoholics are under a bridge. But to find out, so this whole notion of functioning and can be a certain way, and what was going on in her life. But she was too young to understand at the time. But as an adult now, she could understand it. And and now he's, in treatment and all these things, and he's, living a wonderful life. They both are. But it was very interesting how she brought that up. And I hadn't heard that before, that, they do, when you think about education as a young person, they present it as one way, right? That it's the drug addict, and they want to scare you, right? And I get that. Some people need to be scared, but then there's also the part that, no, there's also this whole other side where alcohol and drug use is, with the opioids and all of that. Yeah. Interesting. So thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful.
Thank you for receiving. I think it's really important just for everyone, because viewing alcohol in only those two different extremes makes it really hard for people who are living in the gray to ask for help, because people feel like they have to be labeled as an alcoholic in order to want to change their relationship for alcohol. So that's so much of the work that I do with my clients now, is just saying, this substance actually isn't helping anyone. It's just harming all of us to different degrees and at different rates. And so when we can kind of put down those polarities of like, I'm either an alcoholic or I'm perfectly wonderful, and it opens up all of this gray area in between, where people can have more permission to ask for tools or ask for help or question their relationship with alcohol without having to label themselves as a quote unquote alcoholic.
Yeah. Which is kind of how you explained that whole portion there. As you said, I wasn't one or the other.
Right.
I was human, and I was messy, and I was successful, and I showed up, and then sometimes I didn't. It was all of that. So wow.
Yeah.
So continue with your story then. So you felt like you were at bottom. What turned?
Yeah. So, when I got my DUI in 2009, it's funny because in preparing for this, you ask yourself, what would you have changed if you could have done something differently? And my mind says, oh, you would take that painful DUI out of the way, like remove that sucker. Then this whole thing looks so much prettier. But I don't think I would actually change a thing, because that DUI was a gift, because it interrupted my life, and I changed everything. I quit my job at the gym that I was working at. I stopped working for Les Mills. I stopped teaching everything except for yoga. So ever since 2009, I used to teach it all. I used to teach spin and step aerobics and body combat and the whole shebang, but I only teach yoga going forward since 2009. So that's been something that's really changed. But then I went to work for my dad. And so my dad has had an oil and gas business ever since I was in junior high and high school. And we've always talked as adults about how great it would be to partner forces and to work together. And so while getting the DUI and blowing up my life wasn't the way that I had imagined that would happen, I was so grateful to have a father who was ready to welcome me into his industry and his business. And we've worked side by side now for we're in our 12th year working together. So that has been just, being able to partner with my dad in that way has been such a gift and such an amazing dimension and layer to our relationship that I never would have foreseen. And like that could never have been replaced by anything else. But now I've spent the last 10 plus years or so in this industry with high hopes of taking over the company and perhaps running with that someday. And COVID and the price of oil and all sorts of things that have happened just along the way have made that so it's not as much of a possibility or a reality as we once had thought, which again is totally perfect because my heart has also changed. So, in the past 10 years or so, I've been teaching yoga and working for my dad and also continuing to drink. So after I got out of rehab, I was sober for almost 2 years. And then I kind of fell back into the classic, oh, I can manage this now. This wasn't that big of a deal. And I kind of just slid right back into the same patterns. And again, did really great work for like 10 years and worked at the same yoga studio and had packed classes and people that I love and really love me. And still just continue to kind of fight this battle with alcohol. And almost 3 years ago, I was able to set it down for good. And it was almost like just a switch that flipped off. And I say that with a lot of like that switch that flipped off was that switch is stacked on a mound of hundreds of other switches that didn't just get flipped off. So I want to make sure to not communicate that that was just some sort of easy thing, but it was my time, and I was ready, and I let it go, and I did it, and it's just gone for me now. And so now, in the wake of me being alcohol free and all the dust settling inside of me, you know, I'm ready just to forge my own path and to move forward with this life coaching and yoga to just stand alone on its own right. And that's a place I've never been before, and that's very exciting.
So that's what you meant at the beginning on the taking a risk, that you were ready to jump out there on your own and that you might throw up.
Yes, ma'am. That's it. We have arrived at that moment.
Well, yeah, because I was thinking, well, wait a minute, this oil and gas, leadership or executive or whatever your role is, isn't in the title that I read earlier. So interesting. Right. That you're willing to give that up, and that what that means. I'm sure financially there's a big financial change when you go from a corporate role to an entrepreneurial role, and as well as someone called it the other day, I'm used to that magic bank account where every 2 weeks when I look at my bank account, it just magically there's more, something got put in there, and they're like, I'm not ready to give that up. So it sounds like you're going to be giving that up and then stepping boldly into this new space. Well, congratulations on your decision. That is a big decision. It's hard to leave that world many times. And I interviewed a lot of people who talk about their side gig and how they want to step into that, but they're not ready to yet because of that very reason.
Thank you. And honestly, I don't know if there ever is a ready. I think for me right now, I've done all of the things. You could always be more ready. There could always be more money in the bank or feel a little more certain or secure. But what I think I'm learning right now, honestly, is that certainty and security, they're really illusions. And I feel like COVID really taught me that. Like all the things that the anchor points that we've wrapped ourselves around that make us okay, man, they can really kind of be gone way more quickly, I think, than I ever gave them credit for. And so the conversation I've been having with myself is just like, I think what I'm longing for, it doesn't really exist. And if it does exist, I think it's for me to create it in this moment. And there's nothing else that I can do that will create it except for just to take the step.
Wow. Really love that notion of certainty is an illusion, and it is. I remember in COVID, so I've done quite a bit of programs with Landmark Education, and in COVID, they offered a program called, dealing with crisis or dealing with these times of uncertainty, it was something about being strong during times of uncertainty. And really how they opened was, life has never been certain. We just had a belief that it was certain, and COVID rocked that for the entire world, which that's the big deal, right? Is that as an entire world, we got rocked. Because a lot of times, like in your case, your DUI rocked your world, but that was just you as an individual. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to change. So, but when the world has to really look and go, oh, yeah, the world as I know it is no longer the same. That's a very different perspective. So thank you for introducing that concept, because it's true, that life isn't certain. We just believe that it is. And we think that magic bank account, for those people who are like, oh yeah, I love that magic bank account, that could end at any time. It did for me. It was there. And then I was on the list, and I had survived many, layoffs before that, but then all of a sudden I was on the list. Interesting.
And there's nothing you could have done to prevent it or change it. So it's something about having my own back, and something about knowing that, I think that my whole life was spent trying to avoid the problems, like trying to I think that's why I drank for so long, is because let me just pause. The quote that I live my life by, and that I follow my business by and everything, is Thich Nhat Hanh's quote, "No mud, no lotus." And I feel that I spent my whole life trying not to get dirty, and like being in the mud and at it and saying, I shouldn't be muddy. What's wrong with me that I'm muddy? Like, I shouldn't have these problems. What's wrong with me that I can't solve this, that I can't figure this out? And so I always made it that I was wrong because I thought that it was like a bad thing to be muddy. But what I've learned now is that everyone gets dirty. It's just whether or not you're going to take that dirt and let it grow you, or let it change you, or let it teach you something so that it can be for a purpose or be for some sort of good. And so that, I think that's what I'm learning right now, is that like the mud is unavoidable, but whether or not I learn something from it, that's my choice. And that's what I've proven to myself, is that all of these times when I have hit rock bottom in the past, that I have the ability to have my own back and to pick myself up. And so it's not so much the certainty that I'm trying to find now, but just the knowingness that in the uncertainty, I have my own back. And since I no longer drink, I fully believe that. When I was drinking before, I was like, well, I hope this goes okay, but who could really be sure? But now that I'm not drinking, I have a foundational belief that I will be okay no matter what occurs.
Wow, that's a lot of powerful stuff all in one all in one description there.
It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So was there one time frame? I mean, can you kind of help share how you just kind of said, you know, I'm going to do this? Was it journaling? Since you're into yoga so much, I'm guessing that's such a big part of you. But you know, so the not drinking was one part of this. But what kind of really said, okay, now I'm really going to tell my dad, and I'm going to give notice, and you know, and maybe I don't know that you've got all that put in place, but I'm assuming you did if you're announcing it here.
Sure do. You know, honestly, for me, it's the returning to the yoga practice and letting, like, and I want to use this word carefully, letting and almost expecting it to change me. Like, I came to this point as a teacher before I decided, but I was making the decision whether or not to stop drinking. And I sort of came to this place for myself. I was like, hey, Kacey, if you don't quit drinking, this is pretty much what you can expect for your life. I think you've sort of hit the ceiling of your growth and your impact, and maybe you'll find love, maybe you won't, I'm not sure. But if you keep drinking, this is probably the limit for you. And I had just a very clear picture of that. So when I sat down, the drinking, it was like I allowed myself to graduate to the next level. And it's not that there aren't any problems there. It's just that they're not the problems that I had that were being caused by alcohol. And I'm not caught in that cycle anymore. I think I forgot your question.
Oh, that's perfect. It was kind of what brought you to this point? And it sounds like your decision to stop drinking, you kind of said, I know the path that's probably going to happen if I keep drinking. What I don't know is what could my life look like if I was to stop drinking. And then, so you're in that mode of wander again, right? Wander, take a step, and
Yep.
see where it leads, but also scary.
Well, yeah. And I think I just got really clear that it's like, if the alcohol has to go, and if it doesn't go, that's okay. But then just stop torturing yourself and stop wanting more, because more won't be available to you. But I said, no, that's not really how I'm wired. I know that I'm built for bigger impact than this. I know that I have something to share. And so, so when I let go of the alcohol, that cleared the path for that to occur. And then it was really coaching and like allowing someone else to bear witness to my brain, and like getting to see the limiting thoughts and the limiting beliefs and the negative patterns and the way that I talk to myself, and how those thoughts influence my feelings and my behavior. So I think it was the not drinking, and then the coaching that allowed me to see my own mind and change my own mind. And then the yoga practice helps me to integrate it in my body, because it's not enough just to know this in my brain. If it was enough for us to know it, we would all just read the books and be cured from whatever it is that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
But it requires knowledge and then cellular understanding. And it's the yoga mat really where I achieve my integration and my cellular understanding. And it's sort of that process for myself that I'm then able to extend to my clients in whatever way works for them.
Wow. Well, and now you're in integrity.
Yes.
Yeah, because if you I don't think you could be a life coach if you had continued in that way, because you know the what sounds like what you were telling yourself more internally and shining a light there isn't the same as how you might shine the light on someone that you're coaching. So, interesting. I don't know, maybe
Exactly.
I'm making a leap there, but
No, I had to experience it for myself in order to be able to support someone else to create an experience for themselves. It's not enough for me to just tell you, well, this is how you do this.
yeah,
No, as a coach, I have to embody it. And that's what saying goodbye to the alcohol allowed me to really finally do.
yeah, wow. Very cool. Well, Kacey, I could just keep asking questions all afternoon here, but we do need to start wrapping up because I'd like to keep this at a certain time limit. So can you, there's two kind of wrap up questions that I have. One is, what do you think has served you best when you look back on your career? Is it a personality trait, a strength, faith? I mean, what is that thing?
Honestly, I just never, ever, ever, ever give up. And I think that it has been, and it's not that I just barrel through or anything like that, but I just have chosen to never give up on myself. And to really never give up on life. And I think that that's just really carried me through. It sounds kind of silly, those words coming out of my mouth, but I really feel like that's it.
Yeah, perseverance. Well, and I've had others say that too. But what I also got out of you is not just that you never gave up on yourself and you kept going. You kept learning and growing. You kept, what is the puzzle? How do I solve this? What is that thing that's calling me? So yeah, you never gave up on yourself. Would you say?
Yeah, and I really learned. I learned from my mistakes. I'm sorry.
Wait,
Yeah, I would say it's perseverance. I would say it's resilience.
resilience. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes perseverance, I look at that and think, well, they just kept going. But resilience is there's a bouncing back or a modification or a course correction. I guess that could happen in perseverance too, now that I think about it, but I tend to think of it more with resilience. So
yeah. And I did really learn from my mistakes. I internalize them and I let them change me and grow me.
very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And the last wrap up question then is, and you've already shared some wonderful words of wisdom, so I don't know if you're going to use one of those, but what words of wisdom have really been powerful for you in your life that others might then benefit from?
I think I'd have to go back to the no mud, no lotus. That truly, like, in this life, none of us makes it out unscathed, and that's not the point. I'm in a relationship now, and it's not about not having bumpy moments. It's about being able to take care of each other in those bumpy moments and being able to create the relationship that we do want out of those bumpy moments. So I think leaning into the mud and like almost being excited about the mud and rejoicing in the mud, because it's like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to refine myself and grow and stretch even further. So I would just offer to people that, all of us are going to get dirty, but not everyone is going to choose to grow. And I would just really encourage people to use the dirt to help them to flourish and thrive instead of just getting dirty.
Yeah. Or being afraid to get dirty, right? So then you're in that no risk mode. And so, because, I don't want to fail. Yeah, I can kind of see that. So, but it's like, embrace the dirt, embrace the mud, because there's
Exactly.
a growth that's going to happen as a result. Wow, I love that. Well, Kacey, this has been so wonderful. I enjoyed meeting you a 3 weeks ago when we first chatted, but I just so enjoy this deep dive into your life. And thank you for sharing the mud and sharing the growth. We've gotten both sides of you. So it has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I truly appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure too. So listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below and you'll be alerted when other interviews are published. And if you have any questions for me or for Kacey, you can find both of us on my website, lifestorycurator.com. That's where I'll post this interview and I'll also post her social media so you can get in touch with her should you want to take one of her yoga classes. If you can get in, there's probably a wait list, or maybe some life coaching, as you've heard her perspective on life and how she might approach that by shining the light. So anyway, on that note, let's stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing the stories. Thank you. Have a great day.